It's a very great pleasure to be in Prague and to have been invited to this lecture. Happiness, everybody wants to be happy. And happiness researchers happily do their thing because it is the hot topic nowadays. That's probably the one field in economics where people work most today, and I think also where the most interesting work is being done. Something is totally new for economists, namely, happiness economists claim that utility can be measured. And people like Robbins, who was cited earlier today, he believed that utility cannot be measured. But, I mean, he lived in 1920 or something, and there is some progress over time. And that's one, namely, we can measure utility by surveys and by several other ways to do that. Now, in this lecture, I want to emphasize the consequences of happiness research for economic policy. The dinner is the most important thing. That will make you happy. Thanks. So the consequences for policy. And the interesting thing is that those economists, many of those economists who do happiness research, now jump to the conclusion. Wonderful. Now we can measure utility. Now the government should maximize the utility of the individuals. Imagine that. They now jump on this new insights in order to, in my view, establish a very extreme kind of government interventionism or even something like a dictatorship. So I would like to convince you of three things in this lecture. The first is that happiness research is really very interesting. It does provide new insights compared to what we knew before. Secondly, I would like to convince you that government should definitely not maximize the utility of each of you or of anybody else. And the third thing I would like to propose and to convince you of is that the government should choose the right institutions or the right constitution in order to enable people to find their own happiness in the way they want. So the constitution should be set and all the rest should be done by the individuals. And I propose two very practical institutions. The one is democracy, or rather direct democracy, and the second is decentralization of political decision-making. What do we know? What has happiness research told us? Namely, the first is that this picture is wrong. It's, of course, a beautiful picture by Van Gogh, but it suggests that people are unhappy all over. Wrong. Totally wrong. We know that most people are surprisingly happy. On a scale from 1 to 10, there is practically nobody with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only at 7, 8, and 9 people start to be. And of course, 10 would be totally happy, but almost all people are in the range of between 6 and 8, somewhere in between, somewhere there. And this morning I had the chance to ask the students of this university and to make a small survey, and exactly the same result came out. Namely, that even Czech students, imagine, even Czech people seem to be relatively happy. Namely, almost not exactly absolutely happy, though there was one person who was absolutely happy, and I'm also absolutely happy, so too. But all the rest was very much skewed towards happiness. So, on the whole, we can be satisfied with what we find. Secondly, I think we have new insights concerning some aspects of the economy. Do you remember the times when people said there's voluntary unemployment? There is nothing like forced unemployment. It's a choice. You don't want to work for the money offered, and then you are employed, and that's free choice. Not true. People who lose their job for any reason, who lose their job, so move from being employed to unemployed, get very unhappy, are deeply unhappy. It's the largest loss in happiness we can normally observe. This means that unemployment is a real problem. And why is it so terrible? It is so terrible because people feel thrown out of society. They have psychological problems because they feel they lose their competence. They are no longer highly regarded. Expected inflation. You remember the times when in all textbooks you read there are two types of inflation: expected inflation and unexpected inflation. Expected inflation is no problem because you can redo the contracts. Well, no problem. It's only unexpected inflation which causes costs to people. Not true. We can't find that. We find that inflation overall damages the happiness of people. The third thing, do income differences motivate? Of course, we think that the more unequal the distribution is, the stronger are the incentives to work hard. However, that's only true for the United States, and moreover, for the wrong reasons. In Europe, people dislike when the income distribution becomes more unequal. They really dislike it. And that's perhaps our past. We are used to think that when some people earn more and others less, that this is unfair. I don't say that this is so. I say that is the empirical evidence of what people in Europe think. Now, Americans seem to think differently. They say when some people earn a lot of money, I have the chance to move up also. And it's great if I can move up a lot. However, Americans are wrong because upward mobility in the United States is not higher than in Europe. They believe it's higher. It's wrong. It's not higher. So they believe in something for the wrong reasons. These are some 3 examples of how happiness research changes our notions of in the economy. Another notion is that economists thought that material things are crucially important. Here I show you it's not true. Happiness research tells you that non-material aspects, such as caring for each other, are dramatically important. Now, that sounds all very sort of vague and weak. But I tell you, the results I bring here are based on the most advanced econometrics. It's based on huge data sources. And on the whole, it's, I think, a good empirical evidence. So it's not just talking a little bit, yeah, it's nice to care for each other and then we are more happy. No, that's not the point. The point is that we have strong and I think convincing empirical evidence that these effects are indeed true. Then, adaptation, very important. We are used to always look upwards. We adjust very quickly to new circumstances. And when you have a lottery win, your happiness goes up very strongly, but goes down also quite strongly again. And when you have a very heavy accident and must sit in the wheelchair, then your happiness, of course, goes down very strongly, but fortunately it adjusts back, not totally to what was before, but it recovers. And I think that is a very good thing. So adjustment, adaptation is very important, and that is an aspect we did not really take into account in neoclassical standard economics. Status orientation is again extremely important. You remember our models where we have utility depends on income or utility depends on consumption, on the consumption level. Not true. It depends on your consumption level and the consumption of other people. And you always compare these two things with each other. So that is another new aspect. And that is a Ferrari if you don't see it. Now, something which every politician and every nice person tells you, marriage makes you happy. I mean, look at that. And it's even true. Look at that. Here we have 0.0. That is when marriage takes place. So marriage is here. And we have data, namely panel data, where we really trace the happiness of individual persons over time. So we can see what was the happiness level 10 years before being married. So this chap or this lady didn't even know whom she is going to marry. She didn't know whom she will even meet. So this happiness level here is not influenced by the consequent history. So we can say such a person has an average utility happiness here. And then coming near to the date of marriage, happiness dramatically increases, very strongly. You can see the difference, it's huge. And then it goes down again. As strongly as before. Now, this is a little bit unfair because it's lower than at the beginning. That is not a general result. On the whole, married people are somewhat happier than non-married people. And of course, that's also a selection effect. When you consider who is not married, probably those in prison, imbeciles, and those in the military, people like that. So a little bit, not normal people, while normal people get married. And so it's also a selection effect. TV. TV is the most important activity in your life. that's an empirical statement again. Taken over your life from age 2 to age 92, people watch more TV than they work. Work is secondary importance. TV is the most important thing today. And the surprising thing is only that economics doesn't take that into account. When you look at, have you ever attended a lecture on TV economics? Probably not. But you have attended dozens of lectures and dozens of courses on labor economics. And all these books and journal publications, labor economics, it's full of it. TV, no economists seemed to be interested. Now, I did this research together with my co-worker, Alois Stutzer, and my lady assistant, Farbenesh. And actually, we wanted, of course, show TV, look at him, makes you unhappy. I mean, he's lying there. He doesn't look very happy. He must have a beer to raise his happiness in the short run. So that's what we wanted to show. We had bad luck. We couldn't show it. TV seems to be quite good for some people, at least. Namely, and here comes opportunity cost into it, people who have low opportunity cost of time, they enjoy TV. So they don't know what to do else. And so TV is good for them. However, people like you, and perhaps even me, who have opportunity costs of time, who could do something else, who could go to the theater or to see a film, or even to speak to one's wife or something, they have higher opportunity costs. And when these people watch too much TV, they get unhappy. I think that's a quite interesting result, because it really shows how important the concept of opportunity cost is, also in relation to happiness. That is a funny result coming from an economist. Normally, economists wouldn't say, give away money. That is very rational. And helping others is also good. Happiness theory tells you, happiness research, empirical research, tells you that this is indeed the case. When you give, the giver is happier. And the one who receives might also be happier. Doing volunteering, of course, there are two aspects of volunteering. When it may be that happier people do more volunteering, but the other way is also true. People who do more volunteering are also happier. That's what we think we could establish. Then an interesting thing, people do make systematic errors in decisions. And that's a totally new aspect in economics, because due to the approach we had, or we have, or a traditional standard theory has, which says people maximize their utility. They know what they do. Therefore, they don't make any mistakes. Revealed preference is the way economists have approached this problem. But now we find, because we can measure the utility of the people, their own reported happiness, we can show that people make some mistakes with respect to the past. They are not very good in seeing how happy they were in the past. It's quite interesting. But what is, of course, more important is that there are systematic mispredictions about utility, the utility of goods in the future. Systematic, not random errors. And we can now say what this is. It has to do with differentiation between material and immaterial goods. In the case of material goods, people systematically overestimate the utility they will get from material goods. So when you buy this Ferrari, of course, you think, because it's a great Italian car, that you will enjoy it and that your happiness increases in the future when you drive around and all the girls, etc. However, when you really look at the happiness of those people who do buy such things, it's much lower than they predicted themselves. And now the other way around, immaterial goods, the utility, the future happiness, which come from immaterial goods like personal relationships, friendships, being together with relatives and things like that, is systematically underestimated. Probably because it's difficult to think about, to imagine, what does it mean to have a nice relationship? For instance, to have a friend with whom you can exchange ideas and drink good wine. I mean, you don't know him yet. And how can you imagine that this may bring you utility in the future? That is the reason, in my view, that the future utility of personal relationships are systematically underestimated. If this is true, that material goods, the happiness of material goods is overestimated, of immaterial goods underestimated, people probably work too much. Probably. The work-life balance, the work-leisure balance is probably skewed due to this error. That's at least what Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner in economics, the psychologist, suggests. Then I think that happiness research can also show you that procedural utility, the utility you get from the process and not from the outcome, is very important. Now, I know that people don't like that. Culture does not matter, because people like culture. However, we are able, I think, to show empirically that culture matters much less than most people think. Of course, in happiness, there are differences between countries. Systematic differences. So the levels are different. If you ask an American whether he is happy, is there any? Oh yes, he must say, ha ha ha, yes, I'm happy. If you ask a Czech, are you happy? He would say, huh? Happy? Oh, could be worse. Could be worse. And the same with the Swiss. Now, my claim is not that these differences don't exist. But you can pick that up with a constant in your equation. What I want to say with this is the marginal effect of those determinants of happiness are surprisingly equal between countries. For instance, when somebody is employed and then moves into unemployment, so becomes unemployed, then the fall in utility, in happiness or life satisfaction is very similar in most countries we have looked at. Not only my research group, but many, many other researchers. And that is what I want to emphasize here. Now, that is the most important thing, I think. Happiness research can give you information on what basic institutions in society work well and which basic institutions do not work well. And here we concentrate on political institutions. Perhaps the first has to do with democracy. It has been shown that the more, the better representative democracy is in a country, the happier people are, all other things being equal. When I say all other things being equal, that means in our research something like 30 other determinants are controlled for. So income and age and whatever you like, 30 other. We only vary the amount of a democracy. And what I did with my co-worker Alois Stutzer, we looked at direct democracy over Swiss cantons. We have 26 Swiss cantons in Switzerland, and they have unequal degrees of direct participation rights. And we were able to show that those with more direct participation rights in these cantons, people are happier. And how can we explain that? I think with two things. They are happier because government is better controlled with direct democracy. That is the first effect. So government works better. And the second effect is people like to participate in the political process and want to be heard. The second political institution which I find important is decentralization. Political decentralization by federalism, by federal structures as exist in the United States and in very many other countries, but I do not think that it is very strong in the Czech Republic as far as I know. So federalism means that political decisions are taken on as much as possible on the local level, and people are happy if this is done. Now, what should we do about policy? We could discuss what possibilities there are at the micro level. You see that it does, that my suggestion is that the government and researchers doing research on these questions should inform or can inform people, and that this should be discussed. So, for instance, if people really believe that buying a Ferrari makes them much happier in the future, I, of course, would not prohibit buying a Ferrari, nor would I tax it very highly, but I would tell people, look, our evidence, our empirical evidence shows that it probably doesn't make you much happier than before, but go ahead if you like. I think information can work. Then on the macro level, I do think that governments should make a greater effort than up to now to try not to have any unemployment with the right policies, which very often mean better possibilities to move in and out of jobs. And of course, in many countries, it's almost impossible to dismiss people, therefore people are not hired. So there are a lot of possibilities for government to reduce unemployment, and I think one of the consequences of happiness research is, yes, let's do that, and perhaps inflation is relatively less important. Economic growth is probably not as important as many people think. Especially in rich countries, we know that when real income rises, people get adjusted very quickly. The magnitude is about, if you have a rise in your real income, your happiness, of course, rises too, but 2/3 to 3/4 of the effect on happiness disappears already within 1 year. So let's be somewhat critical about material economic growth in our countries, in the rich countries. But we know perfectly well that in poor countries, it's very important to raise real income because it really pushes up happiness. Now, what are the approaches? One of the very new approaches is this new paternalism. I wouldn't like to go into it for time reasons, but I don't particularly like this approach by Thaler and others. And I think that the picture is nice. It's from The Economist. You know, the big government tells the small citizens that they should not make any mistakes and that they should do the right thing to become happy. My question is, of course, why should the politicians and the public bureaucrats, first of all, really see what an individual makes happy? And secondly, why should they have an incentive to do that? Politicians have no incentive generally to raise happiness. They have a strong incentive to be re-elected, which is not the same. What I would think is the real important lesson from happiness research is that we should choose constitutions in the way of suggested by Buchanan, namely rules of the game, fixing rules of the game, where citizen participation, decentralization play a large role. And you talked about prize winner, talked about Europe and the future of Europe. And if you see those two things and think of Europe, then you really get unhappy. Because this so-called new constitution of Europe really disregards citizen participation. I mean, you are a member of the EU. You may vote all 4 years for some chaps who afterwards sit in a parliament with 600 people. Could you imagine? Is that democracy with 600 people? Ridiculous. And no possibility for direct intervention by the citizens, except one very, very small possibility, which leaves it to the parliament whether they are good enough to take into account the views of citizens. That's unfortunately the European Union, not on the taxation level, but on a more political level. And I think you, the Czech, should really push for more democracy in this European Union. The same applies to decentralization. Now, some of my colleagues who do happiness research think differently. They say, now we can measure utility. Now we can measure utility in terms of happiness. Now the government should come and do that. And the English government, the former and the present one, is very strong on this. They want to do that. They say, now we have the empirical basis to really maximize happiness. I would propose that there are several important objections to this. The first is from welfare economics. I want to only emphasize this. Happiness is, in my view, not the only thing. There are other things which are equally important. And because we can now measure happiness, that doesn't mean that everything should now be concentrated solely on happiness. loyalty, responsibility, and freedom are also very important. And it's not the same as happiness. I readily concede that what I say is somewhat extreme, because there are philosophers who believe that these things are included in happiness. But to me, it's something different. Now, objections from political economy, I think they are very important. Namely, when government start maximizing happiness, it's really an extreme, the most extreme case of a benevolent dictator. Now, the people who like to tell the citizens what to do, now they can claim, we know how to do it, because we know what makes you happy. We then do not need any political processes. We don't need any discussion, because we have here the nice results from happiness research. And I think that's totally wrong. And the citizens play no active role in such a government maximizing approach. They are just there to be asked, how happy are you? And then the government does all the rest. And that's certainly not what democratic politics is about. Then the third group of objections is that as soon as something is measured and becomes the object of politics, of policy, it will be distorted. It will be systematically distorted. Imagine if you were the British Prime Minister, and you say, now I undertake a policy which makes you happy. And then, unfortunately, the results of the survey tell you that the Brits are not so happy. What would you do? Of course, you would start to manipulate the data. All governments always do that. And the Italians do it all the time, and did it when they wanted to enter the Eurozone, and a lot of governments do that. You see, as long as the surveys on happiness are not used for policy, that doesn't happen. But as soon as it's used for policy, it's a totally different thing. And then, of course, the individuals start giving wrong answers or distorted answers. Imagine the following situation. You are a real right-winger. Yeah, probably you are. You are a real right-winger, and then, but your government is left-wing. And then you are asked, how happy are you? And then, of course, you will say, oh, I'm very, very unhappy. Though perhaps in reality you are happy. But you want to punish this left-wing government. So you immediately have incentives to manipulate, even as a person being asked. We have a lot of open issues. Should we accept status desires, or shouldn't we? I don't know. What about adaptation? I have here a case of legal compensation. Imagine the following. You are a judge, and there is a lady coming and a gentleman coming, and both were subject to the same accident. And the difference is that the lady has adjusted quickly to the accident, and the gentleman slowly. And when you only look at happiness, you would have to conclude that the gentleman must be given a lot of compensation and the lady little compensation, because she adjusts quickly. We know that such a situation is not an equilibrium, because the lady will immediately start to say, oh, that's not true, I don't adjust so quickly, in order to get the same compensation as the gentleman. So that is certainly a situation which may not go on. Now, my conclusions. I think happiness research is really fascinating. We can do something with respect to policy. I think there are real strong objections against this maximizing approach, which I think the French president is also a person who would like to do that, and he started already inviting people to help him. What I think should be done on this basis is, on the basis of happiness research, let's introduce new institutions, additional institutions to enable people, citizens to participate. And secondly, let's introduce more institutions to decentralize. Thank you very much.